Is there a bigger business lifeline than making predictable, profitable sales? The concept of the sales pipeline is probably the most misunderstood in small business. This topic is for businesses where sales happen through conversations, where your customer, client, or patient is making a considered decision to work with you. If someone can click and buy in 30 seconds, this probably isn't your world. But if they need a call, a visit, a proposal, or time to think it through, you're in exactly the right place. For 15 years, I've watched the sales pipeline get explained and applied disastrously, quietly costing businesses thousands in lost revenue. So today we set the record straight. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly where deals are leaking, which software is worth your time, and how to build your sales pipeline properly. This all sits inside a bigger framework that I call the peak profit paradigm. You can see the full overview on my channel, but the short version is this. Picture your business as a mountain with three sides: automations, leads, and pipeline. Your sales pipeline is the foundation everything else sits on. And in a small business, without a big team to carry the rest, that foundation matters more than most people realize. Picture that pipeline as the path up that mountain. Every single person who contacts your business is walking some version of that path. And every path up a mountain has either ways to accelerate up it or ways to slide back down it. It's like a real-life game of snakes and ladders. The ladders are the stretches of the path that carry your leads up towards working with you, and the snakes are the spots where someone quietly slides back down to a place where you can't see where they went. Today we mark that path out properly. Every ladder named, every snake fenced off. And if you've got questions as we go through this, drop them in the comments. I'll either answer them live or come back to them afterwards. So let's start with why this is such a mess. If you get 10 business owners to describe what a sales pipeline is, you get about 6 different answers. A few of those misunderstandings end up costing real sales. For some, it means lead generation. It's the stuff at the top. How many inquiries are coming through in this month, with almost an arrogance or a naivety as to what happens afterwards in the sales process. So some see it as lead gen. For others, it's meetings in the diary. That's what sales pipeline means to them. Just a number. How many calls have I got booked this week? And for others, it's a conversion rate. Just a percentage sitting on a spreadsheet somewhere that nobody really looks at. Every single one of these three is dangerously incomplete. Somebody who could have worked with you slides off the path, and you never even know it happened. You just wonder why the numbers don't add up. The most common misunderstanding, though, is this one. You might recognize the sales pipeline structure here, the kind of 4 stages. It's 4 stages on a board: new lead, meeting, proposal, won. 4 boxes. Let's write those down. New, lead, meeting, proposal, and won. Now, the problem isn't that those words are totally wrong, but they are to a degree. I'll come on to that. It's that they imagine these 4 boxes handle everything that happens between them. And as we'll see, 2 of them shouldn't even be there. Look at the gap between new lead and meeting. This is the most costly gap in your business. Are they even interested in what you have to offer? Do they actually have enough understanding to make a buying decision? And who decides that this person is even worth an hour of your time? And if they take the meeting, nothing in your process is documented for people that early in their buying process. So what happens is you improvise differently every time. Sometimes well, often not. Improvising is never good for any consistency. And even if they do buy, you're probably serving them in a million different ways, and your service levels and energy will suffer. So if you're a serial meeting taker, this is where you're throwing your high value positioning out the window and losing time and traction in your business. So this is our first big snake. There we go. That's a snake. Next, look at the gap between proposal and won. There's a gap there too. That's where the rest of the sales quietly disappear. People buy on their own timescales, not on yours. Almost every gap between those 4 boxes is an unmarked snake. And the people sliding down them are people you paid good money or good time to attract in the first place. That's expensive ground to be losing because you're meeting with everyone. There's no consistency of what people know before that meeting or of what you've promised out of it. So your follow-up ends up being customized and all over the place. It's your second big snake. On this classic wrong sales pipeline structure, I'm going to highlight 2 boxes in particular. New lead and won. We'll look at what's wrong with a pipeline box called new lead next. And remember the one labeled 1 too. I'll circle back on it. So we're going to do this differently. We're going to get more precise. It starts not with the pipeline itself, but with who is even allowed onto it. Let's go back to some sales fundamentals. Let's look at what I call the language of sales. Because almost all of what people get wrong with the sales pipeline comes down to using one word when they mean something else entirely. There are 4 contact stages, and only one of these belongs on your sales pipeline. Let me walk you through them, because once you see this, you'll never overlook its importance again. As we go through these, remember that they're not sales pipeline stages, they're categorizations of potential or prospective buyers in your sales process. Okay, first up, a suspect. Suspect matches your ideal client. They're the right kind of business you'd want to work with, but they haven't shown you any direct interest yet. Maybe they follow you on LinkedIn, maybe they've seen your content. These are at the awareness stage, and this is the first misunderstanding where people treat a suspect like a lead. Let's give you some examples. Let's say a new connection on LinkedIn or a follower on Instagram, or that person who's not given you their details and has not really told you they've got a problem. Or like you right now, they're watching a video. That's awareness. It's not interest. Don't confuse the two, because they behave differently. So stop jumping on calls with these people if they don't have a bleeding neck problem. It's costing you time. Okay, next we've got a lead. This is an overused and misunderstood phrase in business. These people have raised a hand for the first time. You've captured their details, they've downloaded something, they've opted into your list, or perhaps they've registered for a webinar. Something like that. They're in your world now, and that's genuinely meaningful. But this is the misunderstanding that costs people the most, and I see it constantly. People treat a lead like a prospect. We're going to come on to that. Downloading your guide is interest in your content. It's not a request to work with you. And this is exactly why you don't point your contact form or your booking link straight at a sales meeting, because then you are handing a one-to-one slot to anyone who clicks a button. That meeting becomes a free fishing trip for them and an unpaid expertise giveaway session for you. You might as well register as a charity, so don't do it. Okay, next. The next stage is where it all changes though. A prospect has taken a meaningful step to work with you. Do you recognize the language? Not your content, it's not your freebie, it's you. It might be that they've replied to your email asking about your services, or they sent you a direct message, or they asked what you actually do and what it costs. It's at this point where the person should enter the pipeline part of your CRM software. And this is where the naming gets interesting. Software like HubSpot, ActiveCampaign and Pipedrive call this a deal. Salesforce and GoHighLevel call it an opportunity. 2 different words, but the same concept. I'm going to call it a deal from here. Deal sounds purposeful, like something you're actively working to complete. Opportunity sounds like a game of chance, and we're not leaving this to chance, are we? So just a note here, if you're on GoHighLevel and like me, you prefer the word deal over the default word opportunity, head into settings and rename it. The setting is under custom objects. Okay, back to prospects. Don't imagine a prospect is a done deal. They've asked, but nothing's signed. The sale still has to be made. If you're doing calls at this stage, treat the first one as a filter. 15 minutes max. You can let it run longer if it's clear as you're speaking that they've got the budget to hire you now, though. And here's just a tip on that. If you're using software like Calendly or GoHighLevel for your meeting bookings, get it to leave a buffer in your calendar of, say, 45 minutes after your 15-minute discovery appointments, in case they have strong buying signals and you both want to keep that conversation going. Okay, let's wrap up the stages. The fourth is a client. At this stage, the buying process is complete. So client. So these are your four. They've agreed to work with you and ideally also paid you up front, either in full or as a substantial down payment. Now it's delivery, onboarding the work, the relationship. They show up as a one deal, a closed deal record. They're no longer active on the pipeline, or they shouldn't be. That job is done and the pipeline should reflect that. Your CRM should also tally up the financial value of those sales so that you've got visibility from month to month. Of those four here, and as we look at the classic sales pipeline mistake, which of those should be on here? Well, it's pretty obvious now that we've gone through the four, isn't it? It should only be prospects that make it on to your visual sales pipeline. Okay? If you got that right, you're doing something good in your business. But if you're allowing leads or even suspects onto your sales pipeline, or you're keeping clients on there, it's just creating clutter and it's creating noise, and it's a time and effort scenario that you don't really want to have. That's it. Just the prospect, not the suspect, not the lead. Those are on your list. They should be getting nurtured, not sitting on your pipeline, and not the client. They're already won. Only the prospect. Have we got that? So the exact moment that a prospect becomes a deal is the moment they appear on your pipeline, not a second before. If you dropped a fresh opt-in lead into that stage one, at best, you'll have built yourself a time bandit. And at worst, you've sent them down a snake before they even take a single step on the sales path. Okay, so we want to avoid the snakes. And in doing so, we want to get the naming right. Right. We know who's allowed on the path, just prospects. Now let's actually mark it out. And do you remember the example I gave earlier of the 4 wrong stages? New lead, meeting, proposal, won. Watch now for what they should have been. You've got 5 stages in a properly built sales pipeline. And I'm going to show you the ladder and help you dodge the snakes at every single one. So let's start with stage 1. As we know, it's not new lead, it's prospect. And in the sales pipeline tool in your CRM, that prospect has a sales deal card associated with them. So let's write that in there and let's show that visually. So prospect, and in your sales pipeline tool, whatever you're using, it will have a deal card like this. There we go. So you'll have a sales card in there, it'll have their name in there or their company, and you'll associate a value with it. They're vetted, they've matched the kind of business or person you work with, and they've engaged with you in a meaningful way. That qualification right there is your first ladder. It carries the right people up and keeps the wrong people off the path entirely. It's at this stage we're inviting them to book a call. Can you think of what comes next? So what comes next is the sales meeting. I might want to call it meeting for short. And at that stage, the card would move on. So they booked a call. And most people treat that as one thing, a slot in the diary, but that's a mistake as well. It isn't just one thing, it's actually 3 steps. How you prime somebody who's booked with you for that call, what you do during that call, and what you do straight after it ends. If you read my book, The Lemonade Plan, the meetings chapter goes deep on this. So let's make a note there. Before, during, and after. We don't put that as 3 stages on the pipeline, but we have processes around those 3 things in our business. Headline is simple. You need to do all 3 of those. If you don't, the space between the meeting and the proposal becomes one of the biggest snakes on the whole path. You have a good call, Everyone feels positive, and then nothing happens because nobody pinned down the exact step before the call ended. So, stage 3. If all's gone well, we're going to prep the quote, okay? You might just call that quote. You might call that meeting. You'll call that prospect. If you've agreed that they want a proposal, this is where you prep it. That's real work and it deserves its own stage. This is the bit the old 4-box version just overlooked. If you don't give it its own box, you'll never see when proposals are quietly getting stuck, especially when you're at the point where you're hiring somebody to run your sales. Okay, so have that as a specific stage in there. Okay, next step is quote sent, but we're going to narrow that off and we're going to say quote sent less than 1 month ago. So this is your active follow-up window. The proposal's out, it's fresh, the conversation is still warm and worked properly. This is a ladder. And it's the one where a lot of your deals should get won. Left alone, it's another snake and your deals go to someone else. At this point, you're sending them relevant case studies, answering questions in their mind, and that kind of thing. Your CRM should be able to do that for you, but I'm going to cover that on the automations in another video. Okay, finally, stage 5. Quote sent over 1 month. And we're going to say over 1 month. Can you see the 2 different categorizations here? This is one of the most commonly missed ladders or snakes in the whole pipeline. People treat stage 4 and 5 as the same thing. They're not the same situation. A quote that's been out a week needs a gentle nudge, some guidance. A quote that's been out 2 months needs a completely different approach. Different reasons to come back, a different conversation altogether. If you treat them the same, you'll either pester the warm ones or abandon the cold ones. And both of those scenarios are snakes. So, that's what those 4 words before new lead, meeting, proposal, and won should have been. 5 stages, every gap accounted for. And we haven't even got the words new lead or won as stages. Now, cutting across all 5 of those stages, there's a second thing, and it's deal status. Every deal on your pipeline has one of 4 statuses. It's either open, lost, won, or it's abandoned. And here's where I circle back to the promise I made earlier. Remember I told you to hang on to 1 from the old 4-box version? This is where it belongs, not as a pipeline stage, but as a status that closes a deal off the active pipeline. The stage tells you where someone is on the path. The status tells you why they've stopped moving positively or negatively. You need both pieces of information because they answer different questions. Without that status layer, you genuinely can't tell the difference between someone you are actively chasing and someone who walked away 6 months ago and is never coming back. If you leave everything as opened on the pipeline board, they look identical, and that confusion makes your pipeline lie to you about how healthy it actually is, and it gets really cluttered. Okay, let's move on to the next step here. We've got 2 time dimensions. This is the part that almost nobody builds in, the part that separates a decent pipeline from a genuinely good one. Your buyer has a decision cycle. How long does it take them to go from, I think I've got a problem I might need help with, to, right, I've decided, I'm going ahead. That cycle should shape how long you leave an open deal sitting there before you recategorize it. But there's a second cycle, and this one almost always gets missed. If you don't win the sale this time, when is that buyer next going to be in the market at all? Let me give you some examples. An accountant's prospective client is probably looking again roughly 10 months after their year end. A garage customer is back about 12 months from their last service. A commercial cleaning prospect is booking cleaning every 5 or 6 months. And a business that went with a different software provider, well, maybe that's 3 months, just long enough to start regretting it. Think about that in your own scenario and drop me a comment if you want my thoughts. A lost or abandoned deal is not dead. It should have a re-engage date. And you build that date right into the record. Your pipeline should tell you not just where everyone is right now, but exactly when to bring the ones you haven't won yet back onto the path. Chances are they've still got the same problems they had when you last spoke. So let's just mark that up. We've got 2 timing dimensions. What's the time to buy? So the buying decision time frame, and when do they look again? So 2 timing dimensions that you need to think about. So there's a lot to think about there, but let's just look at it. The pipeline was never the complicated part, really never was. It should have 5 stages, some clear statuses, and a snake fenced off at every known drop-off point. Then we've got re-engagement dates on the ones that got away. Once you can see where every deal is and what the next rung up looks like, you've got a system that runs without you having to carry the whole thing round in your head. Okay, let's talk software. That's probably what you're here for anyway. Now, you don't want to be running this on a spreadsheet or worse, from memory. A sales-friendly CRM is built to hold exactly this structure. You set up the 5 stages, you assign the statuses, you log the re-engage dates, and the software holds it all so that you don't have to. The platforms you'll most likely come across are HubSpot, ActiveCampaign, and GoHighLevel. All 3 give you a CRM, pipelines, and automations that are actually workable. So it's these 3 here. You'll also hear people mention Pipedrive, Salesforce. These 2 actually are top one up there. There are 4 different scenarios, or 2 different scenarios for how you can buy GoHighLevel. So I'll circle all 4 up there. For most businesses, Pipedrive and Salesforce are not the places to start. And spreadsheets just don't cut it because it's really difficult to safely run automations off them. Same goes for Salesforce and Pipedrive. So what about pricing? HubSpot starts at around £600 a month. ActiveCampaign with sales pipeline starts at around £165 a month. Then there's a product called GoHighLevel, which you may have seen in a couple of different guises. Bought directly from GoHighLevel, it starts at around £60 a month. Or more commonly, you'd buy a license with support and setup through what HighLevel calls a white label provider. A GoHighLevel white label provider is a coaching business like mine, or a marketing agency, or your accountant, and subscription prices vary. But as a guide, my pricing starts at around £67 a month. So barely any difference to going directly. Full transparency here, I'm both an ActiveCampaign partner and a GoHighLevel partner, and a white label CRM provider with GoHighLevel. So with GoHighLevel or ActiveCampaign, instead of buying the raw platform and working through all its complications and configurations from scratch on your own, you're probably better placed buying it through a partner. Ideally one who already understands your sector or your type of business and gets something that's been shaped around the way you actually work. It's lower risk, it's faster to get going, and someone like me who knows the platform sitting in your corner. Okay, so that's your software options. You've got 4 main ones, varying in price and varying in different ways that you can work with somebody. And that's where we'll stop just now, because the triggers and the automations that run all this behind the scenes are a whole separate layer. But here is the one thing I want you to take away. Once this 5-step structure is in place with the relevant categorizations and statuses, automation becomes genuinely powerful. Things that fire when a deal moves forward, or when they've been sitting still too long, or when one of those re-engage dates comes around. But those triggers only work when the stages underneath them are right. Build automations on a broken pipeline, and all you've done is automate the snakes. So we need to get the path right first. If your sales aren't really where they should be, or you feel like you're putting the work in but the deals aren't closing the way they should, the structure underneath is usually the problem. This is exactly what I work on with businesses. Go to GarethEverson.com and let's take a look. And if this video was really just course correction for you and you've already got a CRM, go and open it today while it's fresh and rebuild the stages against this model. If this walkthrough's been helpful to you, drop a comment below, and if you've got questions, drop those in too. I'll answer them. Episode 3 is right there, and that's where we get into the automations that sit on top of all of this. I'll see you in the next one.